Hey, it's Global Politics with Jim Martin. Today I want to talk about the interesting remarks of the Dalai Lama. For those who may not know, the Dalai Lama is the head of Tibetan Buddhism, a movement. I don't think he would want to be referred to as a religion, but perhaps that's the best analog for us. And for those who aren't familiar with Tibetan Buddhism, it's complicated. I'm not going to get into it, but let's just characterize it as a product of centuries of the development of Eastern thought. Recently, the Dalai Lama turned 90 and expressed his desire to be reincarnated, that he planned on being reincarnated, and that he would choose his successor. What does that all mean? One of the fundamental components of the office, so to speak, of the Dalai Lama is that they believe that the Dalai Lama is actually the same person, just reincarnated into a different body. That when a Dalai Lama passes from this earth in his mortal form, he is just reincarnated into a child that has been born recently. Then that Dalai Lama will emerge. The process is complex, and I am short-circuiting it here to say that there's a group of people who go forth and sort of divine the direction in which the Dalai Lama may be, and then they go until they find a very young child who may fit those characteristics. And they conduct a series of tests which involve showing the prospective Dalai Lama some possessions of the previous Dalai Lama to see if they can say, oh yeah, that's mine, or no, that isn't mine, and some other tests. There's more to it than that. If they find someone who fits those characteristics, they announce them as the Dalai Lama, but they're really not yet. Over a span of time, they go to a Tibetan Buddhist monastery and are educated. And once they become of age and complete that education in around 19 or 20, then they are formally, yes, for sure, 100%, he's the Dalai Lama. I don't pretend to understand all of it, but that's the gist. Now, the group of people who go out and figure out who the Dalai Lama is the interesting point here, politically speaking. So obviously, the Dalai Lama is the head of Tibetan Buddhism, which is a worldwide movement. Everybody's heard of the Dalai Lama, won the Nobel Peace Prize, all these sorts of things. He became the Dalai Lama in the 30s, before the fall of the Chinese regime and the ascension of the Chinese communist regime in the late 40s, early 50s. So at the time, the committee that was formed to choose was composed of Tibetan scholars and Buddhist monks and things like this, but also there was a Chinese government official who also played a role in that committee. Now, this is pre-communism, mind you. So the current Dalai Lama grew up in China and then moved into Tibet, which was sort of an autonomous region and loosely governed by the Tibetan monks, influenced by India. All sorts of other things were going on at that time. I'm not totally familiar with that history. When the communists took over in China, they rapidly began to attempt to assimilate Tibet, which is a huge landmass, a large landlocked area between China and the Himalayas. They did this forcefully, violently, and by all accounts, ethnically cleansed Tibet of almost all of the original people who lived there, and then moved in ethnic Han Chinese to take over. And there was a fairly large-scale insurgency against the Chinese communist rule of Tibet during the 50s and 60s that was supported by the Central Intelligence Agency. However, they stopped that during the Nixon administration. Fundamentally, the goals and belief systems and structure of the Dalai Lama and Tibetan Buddhism lay in opposition to the philosophies and policies and procedures of the Chinese Communist Party. And they are opposed to the rule of China over Tibet, however, in a non-violent manner. Very important to remember that. And so the Dalai Lama has been steadfast to that non-violent opposition, but has generally avoided any sort of major controversies involving the Chinese Communist regime. Now, he's 90 years old. Obviously, his mortal body is not going to survive for a whole lot longer. He's got less time left than he's already had. The choice of a new Dalai Lama is quite important, both to Tibetan Buddhists and to the Chinese Communist regime, who politically would like to reinforce their rule over Tibet and their claim to it by relying on the fact that in the previous Chinese government, that a Chinese government official had participated in the selection process. Now, the current Dalai Lama lives in India. He's been in exile there. They were driven out of Tibet. It's one of those kind of Byzantine, very complex sort of thing that when you boil it down is kind of a power play. The current Dalai Lama has expressed his desire to participate and select his successor, and that the Chinese government can't tell him what to do. Basically, they're not the boss of him, which he's proven for a long time that they aren't. So, interesting situation. Another situation in which we have almost nothing to do with. So isn't that nice to hear? Interesting stuff. If you know more about this than me, I would love to hear about it. Please put it in the comments. Please subscribe. Really helps me out to keep providing content that you enjoy. And I look forward to talking to you again very soon. Thanks.